Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this online session this online session by the Hyderabad Literary Festival. This is on a book, a collection of poetry. And before we dive into the session, a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. This session will be for about 45 odd minutes, which means around 8:15 India time. And after that, in the meantime, if you have any comments or questions, please leave them on the YouTube chat window. When the discussion ends in 45 minutes, I will open up the channel for questions. I'll collect whatever questions with Malini's help and share them with the panel here, and then they can discuss the questions and comments that you leave in the chat window. Without further ado, over to you, Dr. Visharam.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this online edition of the Hyderabad Literary Festival. As you know, we've been doing these online sessions for a few years now, and it's a way that we keep our combined interest in literature alive between one festival and the next. So today it's my pleasure to be engaging with two poets, academics, and scholars of South Asian literature. Both are based in the US, but their work continues to be intimately connected with the voices and themes animating culture, politics, and society in the subcontinent. So we have Lopamudra Basu, who is a professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Stout. She's the author of Akhtar, The American Nation and Its Others After 9/11, Homeland, Insecurity, and Homeland Insecurity. That's a mouthful, but it's one book. And the co-editor of Passage to Manhattan, Critical Essays on Meena Alexander. Of course, Meena Alexander is a name that's familiar to many of us at HLF and in Hyderabad particularly. Lopa's poetry has been featured in multiple anthologies and journals, and her full bio, of course, or a shorter bio is on the website and in the communication we've sent out. Our second guest is Dr. Feroza Jasawala, who is Professor Emerita at the University of New Mexico, where she won the Alumni Teaching Award in 2014. She's been teaching in the US for at many universities for several years. She is the author and co-editor of many books, primarily on post-colonial literatures. And she too is a poet. And the reason we're here today is to talk about their new book, which is called Sing Slivered Tongue, an anthology of South Asian women's poetry of trauma in English. And you can see Feroza is holding up the book. But before we get into a discussion of the book, I just also wanted to mention that Feroza is from Hyderabad originally. And again, many HLF aficionados will recognize the name of her mother, Meru Jasawala, who taught English in Osmania University for many years and was principal of Koti Women's College. So the book that we're here to discuss is an anthology of poems by South Asian poets, of course, poets resident in India, but also resident elsewhere in the world. And they talk about trauma of various kinds. So in this conversation, we'll have Lopa and Feroza talk a little bit about why the book, how they put this collection together, how they came into this collaboration, and of course, many other things that we will weave in and out of. So if I could just begin by asking Feroza to talk a little bit about her Hyderabad connection before we actually get into this particular book. Feroza.
Hello, everyone. I'm Feroza, as Usha just said. I'm a Hyderabadi through and through and through and through, actually. I was raised in Banjara Hills. I went to St. George's Grammar School on Abbott Road, which everybody knows. And many of you here perhaps are also alumni of St. George's, to whom that school we are very indebted for teaching us a great love of literature, of being able to be in debate programs, in performance programs. And so, St. George's gave us a very great grounding, and I have to give great good thanks to that. Usha mentioned my mother, Meheru Jasawala, who is well known to many followers of HLF, and of course to the Guru Swami family. Mohan was my mother's student at Nizam College, as was Jaisima and his wife June. So many of you know mother from Nizam College and all the many theatrical things that she did at Nizam College, Shankar Narayan Melkote, and many others that we know as being part of the literary world of Hyderabad. And so I want to give great good thanks to Usha and to Dr. Vijay Kumar for inviting me and giving me this particular space. I'm honored indeed. And I also want to thank Dr. Vijay Sri Chaganti, the late professor who introduced me to Vijay Kumar. And she came and visited me here once in New Mexico. And I'm very indebted to her for giving me a first start in publications, etc. Even though she's no more with us, we should remember her, along with all the other of our professors from Women's College Koti, which used to be Usmania Women's College, Nizam College, and all our Hyderabad roots. I wanted to point out that before this book, I did a book called Chiffon Saris. And in this book, I have some poems of honor to my mother. And one is called My Mother. And then there's another which I wrote specifically because Isaac Sequeira asked me to do so. And I started out, I'll read you only one or two verses from that. And she walks with me and she talks with me whenever I am alone. And she gives to me a love none other has ever shown. My mother is frail and bent up, osteoporosis having taken its toll. I loved her and now I can't face her, particularly as myself in the mirror. Mother who gave me birth, mother myself. So I do want to start this with just giving honor to my mother, who was such an important part of the Hyderabad, Usmania, and Women's College educational, higher learning, literary centers. So thank you all for giving me this space for saying that. And now we can begin to talk about Sing Slivered Tongue. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Feroza, for that very moving opening. So if I may move over to Lopa to start off, if you can talk a little bit, and of course, Feroza, you're welcome to jump in as well, but if you can talk a little bit about how you came to this particular collection and what was behind the collaboration. Because, when you look at the collection of poems in the book, clearly they're about trauma of various kinds. It's not just one thread of trauma. So it's a challenge when you talk about trauma. How do you pull together a cohesive collection that speaks to multiple traumas, but also hangs together in some ways?
Thank you, Usha, for your very kind introduction. And thanks to Feroza and all the other organizers of Hyderabad Literary Festival. It's so great to be here in this space. I do not have, like Feroza, a personal connection with Hyderabad, but I'm deeply honored to be invited to this space. Hyderabad has existed more or less for me in the imagination, even though I did visit once in my childhood, because, Meena Alexander, who was a very important influence on me, wrote about Nampally Road and, the geography of the city, though I'm sure it has changed vastly now, comes alive, and its rich history comes alive to me. And also through my friendship with Feroza, Hyderabad has grown in importance. Going back to your question about this book, I think it was about 2.5 years ago when we first started thinking about it. And yes, it does take as long as that, or even longer sometimes, to bring a collection like this together. And we are both academics in the US. We teach post-colonial literature, and we find that the preponderance of post-colonial texts happen to be fiction and novels, and there is a dearth of poetry. So I think our need for the anthology arose from our teaching and our scholarship, where we noticed this vacuum and we felt we could intervene in trying to put a collection together. So, I work on memory and trauma studies, not just with respect to South Asia, but also I've done some work on post 9/11 literature, which is also about trauma. So, I do have that scholarly interest, which made me want to fuse my poetic and creative interests with my scholarly in envisioning this anthology. I, approached Feroza, who was a poet and somebody I knew through many conferences and networks, and she was very enthusiastic in her support of this, and we started collaborating. We put together a kind of a broad call for poems, where we included various facets of trauma, whether it was political, beginning, because historically, there have been many instances of trauma in South Asia pertaining to women. We go back to histories of partition, in multiple kind of eras, but there are also domestic, intimate aspects of trauma which we wanted to foreground. So we didn't want to kind of take away the particularities of each traumatic experience. We wanted to give each individual poet their space and their voice, not to brush, have one brush stroke to color them all, but at the same time to invite everyone to respond to this theme. And when we put this out to various websites and our groups, we also tried to contact people individually if we didn't know them, and over like 1 year or so, we collected quite a few, and then we got together and kind of went through them, sifted them, and saw certain thematics emerge. There were some which were clearly historical and political. Then contemporary events like the recent pandemic and the trauma it introduced also gave us a rich offering of poems. And then there were poems which were more personal and intimate. And we didn't group them thematically, they're alphabetically organized, but I think many poems speak to each other and there are conversations happening. I'll stop here and let Feroza continue on this.
I was very, very honored that Lopa came to me with this proposal. And, she really is a great co-editor, co-author, co-person to work with. And actually, I should give her great good thanks, because she did all the heavy lifting with this book in terms of doing all the very, very many emails of the people who were submitting and sending either acceptances or declinations and so forth. And Lopa came to me because she did the first review of this book was done by Lopa. And she's the one who gave it the most publicity. And I'm ever grateful to her for that. And so I'm very grateful to Lopa that she came. Now, Lopa is very well known in trauma studies and has done lots of scholarly writing on on trauma studies. So before we talk about the poetry, let's talk a little bit about the scholarship, because both of us together put together a very thorough introduction to both Indian poetry in English and to trauma studies. This book would work very well in many classrooms, whether you are in India, in the States, or anywhere else, because we have given a very comprehensive, very full history of Indian poetry in English. I have started basically from Professor K.R. Srinivas Iyengar's first book, Indian Writing in English. We have drawn together everyone from Aru and Toruddat to our own Hyderabadi Nightingale, Sarojini Naidu. So we have brought poems all the way from there to the very contemporary poets like Lakshmi Shri Banerjee or Radha Chakravarti or others who are very well known in Indian English poetry. Now, there's a good section of theoretical background written primarily by Lopa on trauma. We have brought in the theoretical discussions of trauma from Steph Krapps and also from your Professor Pramod Nair from Hyderabad University. So we have good background here in this book. This book, along with the poetry, has a very sound theoretical background. And we are giving the subalterns their voice to speak, to sing. As Chinua Achebe said, if we cannot have a voice to speak, we should have a voice to sing. And in this, we have given many authors the opportunity to talk about their trauma. In our last presentation that we did about this, we had several poets from Delhi express, deep emotional thanks for giving them the chance to speak out and present a poem they had written in their journals 20 years ago, but hadn't had a choice to bring it out. And indeed, in this, it's not just sing Slivered Tongue, but sing subalternized voices, as Gayatri Spivak would say, and, give our traumas, our fears, what we have gone through, our life experiences, words on a page that people can read in the future. And that was our effort and our attempt. And we hope that sets some kind of example for other younger people to speak out on various issues, whether it is unemployment, like Shruti Sareen said about Berozgari, or whether it is divorce, whether it is child marriage, whether it is an abusive domestic situation, whether it's adjusting to transgender or LGBTQ issues, or as a Dalit voice. We have brought together poets all the way from Assam to Sri Lanka to Bangladesh, and our beautiful cover is done by Hafisa Nilufar Khan, who is from Bangladesh, who I happen to know in Hawaii from the East-West Center. So I just want to give you that sort of introduction to draw you into the book and tell you that along with being a creative expression, it is also a theoretical and sound scholarly production. Don't you agree, Lopa?
Yes, our identities are hybrid because we are, we began our lives as scholars, and somewhere in the middle we decided we should also have a creative expression for ourselves, but we cannot, dissociate the two, and they try to be blended in our introduction and in this work. So it's a great hope that this is adopted in some courses, whether in South Asia or in the US or other diasporic communities.
Yeah, thank you for that. In fact, you say in your introduction that the book, and I quote here, pursues the task of creating a public culture of engagement with women's trauma, which has been largely invisible and unrecorded. And I would argue that in the past, maybe 2 decades, particularly with publishing houses like Kali for Women, Zuban, and so on, there has been a focus on in women's writing, particularly women's writing around trauma. And I think you mention in your book also Urvashi Butalia's work, The Other Side of Silence. And I just wanted both of you to reflect for a moment on this notion of silence and song, right? I mean, in a way, it's a very evocative title that you have, Sing Slivered Tongue. And it goes back to mythological silencing of women, but also the very sort of physical and material silencing of women. So could you talk a little bit about that choice of title? And maybe you could read also from the particular poem that you reference in the title.
Yes, I'm just back from India for your audience, and we had this wonderful event just a few days ago in Delhi, which was hosted by Yoda Press, in which about 9 poets from the anthology were able to present. and Radha Chakravarti read her poem there, and that is the poem which kind of inspired the title. So I will just one moment to find it and read a little section of it. So this poem is called Severed Tongue, and that inspired our title of Sing Slivered Tongue. The poem refers to the historical but also mythological figure of Khona, the great astronomer who lived in Bengal in about the 10th or through the 12th. Again, the dates are not really known for sure, but she was a very scholarly and erudite woman, and her father-in-law was Varaha Mihir, who's one of the famous astronomers of Chandragupta's court, and her scholarship actually put her in direct competition with her father-in-law, who was so annoyed with her that he had her tongue cut. And that was a way of physically silencing her. But he did not succeed, because very many people don't know or remember Varaha Mihir unless they read ancient Indian history. But Khona's words have survived as folk wisdom. They are repeated and circulated, and so even though her tongue was cut, her legacy lives on. So that was very inspirational for us in the poem. But there are other references by other poets to cut tongues. Philomela, the poem written by Rupali Sarkar Gore, is a reference to the Greek myth of cutting a tongue, but it is also connected to other contemporary incidents of rape, like the Catharsis incident. So we have a number of poets alluding to these instances of silencing, and the collection is actually an attempt to reverse that. But we are aware that there are some silences that we still cannot touch. There is a blank space from which we cannot really excavate the subaltern, and that is again drawing from Spivak's thinking. And there are all of these complicated issues of who is speaking for whom, etc. But without getting into those theoretical debates, let me read just the beginning, perhaps, of the poem on Khona by Radha Chakravarti, Severed Tongue. They say proverbs are man-made. They say wisdom is not for women. But I defy their decree, and as a woman speak a different truth in a different tongue that people can hear when they hold their ear close to the ground. My bold tongue speaks to them of soil, sky, sun, water, wind, and rain. My voice smells of wet earth, manure, and human toil. I say, rain at winter's end signals a blessed land. I say, with willing hearts, even 9 can share a bed. I say, for men, cow dung is toxic, but for plants, it's magic. I say, plow when you have bulls or repent all year. I say, the croaking of frogs signals rain. I say, rice grows in sunlight, but beetle needs shade. So you can see the poem is in Khona, the legendary astronomer's voice. And this section that I just finished with, this is not the end of the poem, but this section is in italics, and these are translations of Khona's words. And they are basically folk wisdom and agricultural knowledge that has been passed down through proverbs. So it's very powerful that these Khona and her words live on, in spite of what happened to her historically.
Yeah, in fact, sorry, go ahead, Feroza.
And we are honored to do this now. Usha, you mentioned about publishing and also about the ways in which publishing silences women. It's very, very hard to find a publisher, or it was certainly when I started 20 years ago, creatively in the US or in the diaspora, to consider our work. It was easy in India. When I started out, I wrote for the Illustrated Weekly of India under Khushwant Singh. I wrote for Mirror, but to find a place that would give us our voice here in the US was very difficult. And there was always a very coterie publication in the New Yorker of a small group of people who had managed to get through, such as Ruth Jhabvala or Anita Desai. But we are we must say that we are very indebted to Yoda Press, to Arpita for taking on this project, for Arpita and Ishita together for taking on this project, because we did try several places and we did not get our voice heard. Then that's the interesting thing. And even with the big trade people and these two editors at Yoda Press took a risk on us, and we are very grateful for that risk. And we hope that many people will buy the book and make their risk worthwhile in terms of reading about women's trauma of very many different sorts. There are voices here that you can use in women and gender studies classes, whether in Europe, whether in America, whether in India, that help articulate women's pain. There is that wonderful poem that Lakshmi Sri Banerjee wrote, right, which is right at the very beginning about rape. And I will read you a little bit out of that. It is right here. The desecrated mother, in painful memory of global protest, social revolution against the brutal rape and murder of a female doctor in the R.J. Khar hospital. And we hope that by reading poems like this, women will be able to resist such acts of violence and maybe even inform men not to perform. Because in this, Lakshmi Sri raises the voice, do you men who have raped this woman not remembered your mothers? That night, the shimmering stars hid themselves in utter shame, as did the night while watching the monstrosity of their dark game. The bleary-eyed mother wept and wept with tears of endless riverine blood. Are these the goons I gave birth to, soaked in such pernicious blood? And we see this more and more violence against women. Why, when we bend to so many women goddesses, men don't mind lying prostrate in front of Lakshmi, asking for her boon and her money, but turn around and either abuse the woman in the house, who should be the Lakshmi, and or rape and or commit violence. And we want to raise that consciousness that it's very important not to ill-treat the women in your lives. In how are the very many ways in which men do in fact ill-treat the women in their lives, through divorce, through dislocation, through many painful ways in which men do continue to have some kind of a patriarchal domination over us. And this is the voice that we wanted to bring out in this particular volume.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to ask Lopa what she thought, but you go ahead with your question, Usha.
Yeah, no, I just was wondering, I wanted to think about two trajectories, right, that the book also kind of represents. One is historically, how has the nature of trauma or trauma itself been represented by women? And what do you see as the continuity and discontinuity in terms of expression and theme? Is there something about the contemporary that is markedly different from, the sorts of voices that we may excavate from the past, or even that have been spoken in the past? Yeah.
I think a similar question was asked to me in one of the recent events that I attended. I may be repeating myself here, but I will still do so. I think we're in an extraordinary moment of backlash right now. I've said this before. So the gains that we had, like maybe right up till the 1980s from various waves of feminism, we now see a retaliation against those gains. And in fact, a reassertion of patriarchy in various ways, whether it is in the location of the South Asian nations or in diaspora. And that is why, there is an urgency to to bring out these anthologies even more, or to represent women's voices. In the US, I don't need to point out to details, but many reproductive freedoms which were taken for granted by 2 generations ago are no longer guaranteed, and it goes beyond that. Other kinds of gender affirming care, for instance, is in question for people who are transitioning. In India, there has been such a remarkable backlash in the sense of physical violence against women in a time of not of war. We have associated violence with the sexual violence on women with partition, with 1971 liberation of Bangladesh, etc. But we are now having these incidents in my own city of Kolkata, which was considered very safe and friendly towards women when I was a young girl growing up there, but no longer so. And this is devastating. And why should it be this way? And what is at work here? I think there are forces of globalization and increasing inequality. In many ways, there's social ferment, which perhaps takes the expression of these kinds of anger and violence, and this is one representation of overall kind of structural violence in society. I do not have a fleshed out answer for that, but I'm deeply aware that this is a moment of acute vulnerability for women globally. And therefore, for those who thought, we are in a post-feminist world, it is very important to revive the lessons of, 1960s feminism, for instance, and bring back some of those practices of collecting women's voices, giving spaces to women, encouraging solidarity and sisterhood in some ways, even though those terms are problematic because there are caste, class, racial divisions, and it's not a utopian sisterhood. But still, to be aware of those things and trying to form certain solidarities is a crucial work that we have to engage in.
And Usha, you talked about bringing out anthologies. It's not just bringing out literary or poetic or fictional anthologies that's important. It's important to bring out women's writing about women in a scholarly way and across ethnic backgrounds. I just want to point out here a couple of more recent books that I've done. One that I co-edited with a woman called Deborah Weigel, who was one of my graduate students, Emerging South Asian Women's Writing. And that also we tried to collect women's scholarship on that, and 2 books on Muslim women's writing done also with another graduate student, now co-editor and colleague, Doa Omran, Muslim women's writing from across South and Southeast Asia. And we collected all Muslim women's voices. And we also did a special issue of the Women's Studies Journal, Muslim Women Speaking Persistently. And we did one anthology also giving voice to Muslim scholars from Egypt and across the Middle East called Memory, Voice, and Identity, Muslim Women's Voices from Across the Middle East. So across ethnic boundaries, we have to work across ethnic boundaries. And we have definitely done that in here. We have many Muslim women's voices in here. We worked very hard to recruit Muslim women's voices. We worked very hard to bring in Jain women's voices. We definitely brought in the Dalit voice, the one that we were able to get. We didn't get many others. But, across caste, race, and transgender, we've tried to give voice to people whose voices are not ordinarily heard. Some who literally asked very much to be included so that their voices could be heard. And that's a very important thing that we need to be aware of and open to people who want to give voice to their stuff and to help them revise, resubmit, redo so that we can bring the work up to international standards. And our book definitely meets international poetic standards, scholarly standards, and giving exposure to the both scholarly and or non-scholarly poetic standing of the authors who have contributed to us. And we are very grateful for 68 poets who shared their voices and their work with us. And we continue to be grateful to those who collaborate with us and give thanks for that.
Yeah,
may-
so
sorry,
sorry,
if-
go ahead, Lopa. Yeah.
If I may add that, a lot of people are curious, how did you select, what was the way in which you rejected or accepted? So our main principle for both Feroza and I, and we were completely, in alignment in this, is, we wanted inclusion. Our job was not to reject, to raise the profile of our anthology and to say, oh, we rejected 90% and it's only a 10% acceptance rate, because a lot of editors pride themselves on just how exclusive they are in terms of being able to bring out. That was not our intention at all. Our intention was to have a broad range of voices. We wanted some well-established poets, of course, to give credibility and bring some of their credentials to the collection, but we were also determined to give people who had never had a platform before exposure. So there are many poets here for whom this is their first publication, and we are very happy to introduce younger poets. I think one person in her bio had said that she's a university student. So we are happy to include younger voices and not just have a kind of a ossifying generation of poets represented. So that's one of the great variety, not only regional within South Asia and within the transcontinental scene, but also within age groups and within expertise or professionalization among the poets.
Yeah,
That's part of our effort to be, that's part of our effort at sisterhood. Our effort at sisterhood is to lift up people, not to exclude them, not to put them down, not to have any kind of snooty attitude towards anyone's work, but we worked very hard to lift people up. One of the great pleasures of doing this anthology was to sit on WhatsApp video with Lopa, have tea, and go through all the submissions and say, we're using this one, we're not using this one, and how to work with it, and or also to say, well, shall we write back to her and say, you could do this change or that change. And that was one of the great pleasures for me, because I live a solitary life. I'm all by myself here in the US and all by myself in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was a real pleasure to have the companionship of Lopa in doing this editorial work.
Yeah, so maybe an aspect of that sisterhood that you're trying to sort of bring through the poetry, right? So I wanted to ask a little more about this spread of, the geographic spread of the writers, because of course, as you yourself mentioned, you have poets from Sri Lanka, from Bangladesh, from obviously from the Indian subcontinent, but also and Pakistan and the diaspora. And I'm wondering, as you read these accounts, what seemed to be universal and what seemed to be particular geographically or, locationally?
Women's pain was definitely universal. Women's pain as motherhood. Actually, just as you were speaking, I was thinking one of the wonderful poems in here is by Pratimaya Doralaski, and I might read out of there about how she supports her child. Let's see, where can I find that and read you a little bit out of that. I was thinking, where is it? Asifa, the present. Okay, here.
4041. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, see it. Do you want to choose one, Lopa?
Prathim's poem. Asifa is one, which is, but if you were thinking about the one with the With the child.
Arranged marriage for teen babies. It's a
Yes,
very
you could do it. Yes, funny. Yes.
about going back and forth with her parents' arranged marriage, and then the disappeared grand aunt, and all of the ways in which motherhood and women's matrilinear connections matter. The matrilinear ways of connecting with other women, and how all of that connects in terms of motherhood. There are some poems here also on motherhood that are that are there. There is Lopa's White Roses. You want to read the first part of it?
Yes, I would like to, but if you wanted to read Prathim's, let's do that first.
Well, let's read yours. Today I click on Kolkata Gifts. Go ahead.
Let me find, I was on the page, so let me find it. 29, okay. So, so this poem was written, as a response to my own experiences with COVID, where I lost my father, and being kind of, far away, and with having no access to reaching him during that time. It was very traumatic. And it was also the time when my husband lost his mother. So within 2 weeks, we lost a parent each. And, this is not a traditional kind of a gendered sort of aspect of trauma, but COVID is a feature in many of these poems. And so without further ado, I will just read a little bit of this poem, White Roses. Today I click on Kolkata Gifts online and order 30 white roses in a vase for you. Ma sends me the photo of the roses and tube roses and the jasmine garland, all adorning your face today. 2 years ago, in the May of hell's heat and destruction, there were no garlands. Flower sellers banished from the city like vermin thought to spread the plague, dying of thirst on the way, walking hundreds of miles, sometimes with no shoes. Today, life goes on as usual in New York, New Delhi, and Kolkata. Do people even remember that there was no firewood or earth to bury the dead? No flights from Minneapolis or Chicago, not even a phone call to hear you in the hospital. We have said often that we have to think of it as a natural disaster, an earthquake or a cyclone like Amphan that tore you away, except that it was not a forest fire and more a Chernobyl with many forewarnings. 2 years later, so many names whispered by the wind, and so many lives like leaves blown away, so many souls still unmourned, and some like the white roses in the vase, pressed forever in memory's folds. This poem is in solidarity with other poems written about aging parents, some lost to dementia, some lost to COVID. There are many poets who are writing about parental loss in some way, which is a universal experience. Going back to Usha's question of what is universal, motherhood, the bereavement, these are universal experiences. But there are particularities, like, COVID shaped my experience of parental loss with a particular poignancy of not being able to have a kind of a closure or a farewell. I think there is a message here. Okay.
Yeah, so
All right.
anyway,
Don't worry about the messages.
Particularly from the, because there's 3 minutes left, about the particularities. I, as a Parsi, wanted to point out that I think this is the first anthology that I know of. It's the first anthology that I know of where we went out of the way to include Parsi poets. So we have the Zarbanu Gifford, who was MP from Harrow in London, in the UK. We have Shernaz Wadia, and we have some others. And we have a nice poem here, which is a diaspora dilemma by a woman called Rashna Wadia, who actually lives in Dubai. And her poem is titled, My Name is Not Navajo. Blue-eyed girls in floral pink dresses and lace-trimmed socks giggled when I jumped double dutch high over ropes, slapped down on concrete, circled in sing-song drum beats played on the dirty mouths of white boys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're out. My black hair, 2 braided ropes tied tightly in a noose, the lynching of ancient beats still beating under the loam. Talks about just being different in diaspora, going to school in diaspora and being different and being taken for being Navajo and not Indian, and the two confusions of, what is Indian, what is Indian. It's South Asian Indian versus Native American Indian. And that's something that I face a lot here in New Mexico, where people ask me, am I Spanish? Am I Native American? What am I? It's the question that comes up all the time. So while there is a universal, there is also the particularities, and sometimes we can get lost in the universality. We want to universalize our experiences. We want people across cultures and across countries and across classroom student demographics to understand and know who we are, but we also want them to recognize our particularities, that we are different and we do fit in, and we have these particularities of which we are proud. We are not ashamed. We don't want to be marginalized because of what we are, because our hair is dark or our eyes are dark or our hair is curly. These are issues that Hispanic women have dealt with. Sandra Cisneros has dealt with, my hair is different. Or African American women, Toni Morrison has written about being different and being marginalized for that difference. So in universalization, we cannot, like Lopa said before, use one homogenizing brushstroke and make everyone the same. We want people in here to recognize that there are different voices of Assamese women from the hill country saying we're different. The poet Vander Putin from Sri Lanka saying we are different, we have a different experience. Akhtar Zia saying we have a different political experience coming from Kashmir. And so, these differences we need to recognize while we also universalize. So we hope the book will reach universally across borders, across boundaries, words without borders, as we say, and yet also maintain the authenticity of the particular. That's what's important, that we not marginalize people because of differences. And that's very important in America today, as there is a vast backlash against diversity, equality, and inclusion.
Yeah. No, I think actually this brings me to another question I had, and I realized that we are into the Q&A section, but I don't see any questions. I see a lot of chatter on YouTube, a lot of people empathizing, sharing experiences. So I guess I have the privilege of asking a few more questions myself. So my question has to do with catharsis. And in some ways, poetry, music, the arts, while they lay bare trauma, they also offer an avenue for recovery. And I was wondering how one might think of anthologies like this as, while on the one hand, they're communicating the experience of trauma, do they also offer a path to recovery? And can you think of any of the poems in your collection that may point to that? I mean, of course, there is survival and there is surmounting obstacles, but beyond that. And if I may just, before I hand it back to you to respond, I mean, one of the phrases that just stuck with me from all the poems was, sadness sits like a snake in my belly, which was something that was in a poem by Sukrita. And I'm thinking that is such a great expression, and you can lay it over multiple kinds of trauma. But then coming back to my question about recovery and catharsis. Yeah.
Well, it's for me been very important, Usha, because my personal experience of divorce led into sort of physical pain, and in my poem Fractured, I'm hoping for a kind of recovery from both the physical pain and also from the emotional pain. In Fractured, I say, who will love me now? with lumpectomied 1.5 breasts and a bulging inguinal hernia caused by moving boxes after the radical hysterectomy of cancers past. None will hold women broken, fragmented, afraid to touch cracked glass, like shards of crystal glassware resulting from being dropped in the deliberate abandonment of betrayals wrought by those who should have loved us. And then in the other poem, where I talk about divorce dislocation, I'm talking from being in Hawaii and how the physical environment of Kilauea erupting is like my own stomach erupting after, I go through so much physical pain even today after that hysterectomy with the stitches that got hernias in them. And I say, Kilauea is erupting again. Hawaiian eruptions I have personified, taken into my body like the eruptions of rancid acid from my own gut through my hiatal hernia, opening like the mouth of Kilauea, drowning me in my own fluids, undigested food, undigestible announcements, filling my lungs, drowning me interstitial lung disease, from the day you erupted with your divorce announcement, turning me to limpid lava. So that, it turns into, sometimes the emotional pain turns into physical pain, and that physical pain we need to take on a path to recovery, as you said, but it's cathartic to express it. And once you express it, you somehow look at it on the page and say, okay, it's now time to move past it, or not time to try to get myself to heal from the physical pain that actually that continues. And when the physical pain continues, then sometimes the emotional comes back out. And then by expressing it, being cathartic, by expressing those emotions, we are able to somehow at least free ourselves from the grief that persists. That's
Thank you for that. Yeah.
If I may
Shobha.
add to that, about the idea of catharsis, yes, it's very Aristotelian. Any kind of tragedy is supposed to produce the experience of the release of emotions. But I think the reason why that is so is because poetry ultimately is an aesthetic attempt. We are attempting to create beauty from these multiple losses and experiences which are not beautiful intrinsically, and that is a transformation. So even in the poem of the part of which Feroza read, she is transforming her pain into a kind of a piece of pottery, or reimagining the experience as an aesthetic endeavor. So I think in that, there is, a transformation from the rawness of the experience to the creation of beauty, and to a kind of a passage, a movement into the future. Some poems which deal with recovery in a kind of collective sense are like Sonali Patnaik's Say, and just a couple of lines from here: speak, woman, speak, howl, whisper, shriek, but say what you must say, your tongue, your only tool, it's all they left behind when they finished cutting through your tongue, your only tool for sieving light from darkness, your words the darkest hour before dawn hearkens. So this is asking all women to speak, and I think this is inspired by Fez's poem, and this is her own version of that. It's a kind of invocation to women to speak collectively. And that too is a process of recognizing that we are not isolated, and this is not just happening to one individual, but there is a solidarity and a collectivity in this experience.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm wondering if we want to round out this conversation with a reading from each of you. If you had to choose, one little piece to read out. And I just wanted to ask, before you do that final reading, what was the experience of the poets in the book who were anthologized? Did you have any feedback about, did they see this as a sisterhood being in the same anthology?
Yes,
this,
especially
yeah,
when
go
we
ahead.
met, when like I had the pleasure of meeting some of these people for the first time in Delhi, like 9 poets, and in Calcutta, there were other poets from the city, and one poet in our anthology who had invited me to an event. It was really remarkable, especially the Delhi event with 9 poets reading and so many people in the audience kind of responding to them. It was very, very powerful and moving. So I think the poets themselves said that they felt a kind of a solidarity in being together, in reading collectively, and that experience we hope to replicate in an online forum. Perhaps I'm working with my local library to invite some of the other poets. Times are always difficult, but we managed here with Hyderabad, so we'll probably be able to do something which is suitable. And if we can get, we can't obviously get all 68, but if we can get about 10 poets with 5 minutes each and having them read, there is a sense of a great power in hearing these aloud, even in an audience which is not face to face. So we are working towards that.
Do you want to add anything, Feroza, or would you like to go into the reading?
I'll go into the reading.
Okay.
Basically, I'll finish out with reading. You had asked about catharsis and healing. And so I'll finish out by reading the end of that poem that I started, Fractured. Why do we submit to fracturing? Grief is too painful to contemplate in purple pensiveness. Can we be kintsugi? Kintsugi is that Japanese art of using gold to fill in the cracks of pottery, particularly ancient pottery. Can we be kintsugi using gold to fill the cracks of my life has become too burdensome? I remain Feroza. Let's see what it is. I remain Feroza, scarred with pyrite, copper turquoise, they call it in India, Nishapuri like my Persian origins, Sonoran gold in my new desert home, where sand pours through cracks like a saved unrepairable. Feroza is, of course, the Arabic word for turquoise, and there's a lot of turquoise here in the Southwest, in the US Southwest. So I identify with myself in that healing moment like a stone of turquoise, which has a lot of kind of gold and or markings on it. And that's the healing part. That the healing part is that while we are cracked, we can still fill gold in the cracks and heal. And that's the one thing that I wanted to say. Lopa, go ahead.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to close with one short poem by Asha Sen, and then I'll read my second poem, which is included. Asha's poem is called "Nobody Loves a Widow," and it has an epigraph by a local Wisconsin poet, Bruce Detlefsen, and that is, "How dare you dream you could stop loving someone just because they stopped living? Nobody loves a widow. In India, they burn them, but there are other ways. Sometimes a lover's jealousy, brought on by a living memory of a love long dead, lights up in fury, turning everything to ashes once again." So this is, this poem speaks to me, even though it's so brief, because of the recurrent nature of trauma. Even, like it's, bereavement is one thing, but then, how it affects one's life, afterwards is what I think this poet is trying to capture. And now I'll just close with my own poem. It's called "At the Border." And in this poem, I think I'm attempting to create a mythical solidarity of women and their suffering with respect to separation from children. And this was written, when the migrant crisis was looming during the first Trump presidency, and children were being put into cages. Clearly that is, continuing in a different iteration right now. So this is "At the Border." A short, pudgy man with ice-gray eyes once looked at my papers at the Ontario-New York border and said, "You are missing one signature from the international office. I'm not sure if you're a PhD candidate or an illegal alien flipping burgers at McDonald's." The words sting, even after a decade. Undeserved guilt, raw fear of a life of many years rudely unraveling, a life spun in libraries, rides on the uptown train to the Bronx, our little apartment of ragged chairs, bookshelves bent with secondhand books from the Strand, floors strewn with essays of students who were single moms, juggling babies and exams between flipping burgers. A lifetime later, now with a new passport, my palms dampen and throat dries at the border. I did not flee a war to come to this land with a toddler at my hip and my life in a backpack. Yet I know if this blue booklet with the watermark of bald eagle is lost, this face or this accent will not shield me. And if born in another country, ruled by cartels instead of unions, I could be that woman at the border, hearing the last wail of a vanishing son, grief turning me to weeping stone like Niobe, or like Draupadi with matted hair mourning the death of all her children in battle, or like Setha, haunted by the ghost of beloved, death more bearable than children sundered by slavery. Thank you.
Thank you both. I mean, that was a powerful note to close on, reminding us of multiple sisterhoods, right, over the years, literary and otherwise. So thanks again, Feroza and Lopa, for this really great session. I have, of course, read the book, and I encourage others to pick it up and read it. There's some really powerful verse in there, and it's disturbing but rewarding. So thank you both so much, and I'll turn it back to Teja to say the final goodbye.
And we want to say thank you, Usha, to you and to Professor Vijay Kumar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Teja has a power outage, so I might have to do the honors of saying the final goodbye. But thank you to both of you, and thanks to our audience on YouTube. I encourage you to go and look at the comments later, because there's a lot of appreciation and a lot of solidarity. So thanks everybody for joining us, and HLF Online will be back with another conversation very soon. So just follow us on YouTube and stay tuned for our updates. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Follow us on Facebook. Both Lopa and I are there.